Welcome to this video, The Divine Will Retreat for Priest, conducted by Fr Iannuzzi. What Father is doing here with priests is extremely important. Jesus says to Luisa in the Book of Heaven many times how important the priesthood is for forming the kingdom of the divine will. To emphasize that, let me give you a quick reading before Fr Iannuzzi starts. In Volume 23, January 18th, 1928, just as I had the priesthood before my coming in order to prepare the people, and the priesthood of my church in order to confirm my coming and everything I did and said, so will I have the priesthood of the kingdom of my will. My daughter, it is a great necessity to form the first priest. They will serve me like the apostles served me to form my church. And with that, let us begin. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
I suppose we can begin by reflecting on the different types of virtues that Jesus exhorted Luisa to exercise and exemplify in order for her, and therefore us, to grow in God's divine will. You see, when we invoke the gift of living in the divine will, we are, in essence, invoking God's power at work in us, because the divine will is not a virtue, it is a gift. And Thomas Aquinas makes it quite clear that the gifts surpass in excellence the virtues. Now, the virtues that we exercise are dependent upon our neighbor. For example, I cannot grow in patience unless I have an impatient situation, in particular, through someone trying to test my patience. I cannot grow in fortitude unless I encounter its contrary, its opposition. And the same with trust and the other virtues. The gift of living in the divine will does not depend upon our neighbor, does not depend upon the contrary to the virtues in order for the virtues to grow, because it is a gift. That means it's freely infused within our soul, above and beyond our human achievement or effort. And among the virtues that Luisa exemplified, Jesus emphasizes trust, confidence, and many other virtues, resignation, abandonment to the will of God, all of which are necessary in order for us to avoid fear, a sense of hopelessness, discouragement, and in order for us to receive His power that enables us to embrace the situation in which we're in without necessarily agreeing with it, but we accept it because it's part of this purification that we're about to enter into in a very more intense fashion. Right now it's beginning, these birth pangs where the world is going to be tested, and God wants us to never abandon trust in Him, but to abandon ourselves to His most holy will, knowing that He is in control of everything. Certainly, we can impact the present situation in different ways, but for the most part, we have very little control over what is happening with this entire pandemic. So without any further ado, let us talk about these virtues that Jesus asks Luisa to exercise and therefore asks us to exercise. Let us start with the moral virtues, the theological virtues, because these are very important. And then we'll go into the divine virtues that are quite new in their exercise, at least in the lives of all of us who are being tested and tried in these end times. First of all, we're living in the end times. What does the end times mean? It means that it's a twofold definition. Number one, we're living in the times of the book of Revelation. These are the end times prophesied in Revelation, in particular when the angel is about to blow the sixth trumpet. These are the times we're living in. We're right between the fifth and the sixth trumpets of the book of Revelation. And end of times also means that it's the end of the time of the human will, the era of the human will, and the outpouring of God's will that enables us to go beyond time in our thoughts, words, and actions, and their exercise and their influence throughout creatures. What does that mean? Whenever the saints before Luisa prayed, without this gift of living in the divine will, their thoughts, words, actions, prayers could only impact people in their lifetime, in their time. Now, with this gift, our prayers exceed time. So they're transcendent, and yet they're imminent. They impact all creatures of our time, but go beyond that, impacting all creatures of all time. So end of times also means that our prayers are no longer bound by time as they were before this gift was outpoured. So our prayers now, due to no merit of our own, because this is not a virtue, it's a gift, can impact all souls of the past, present, and future, not by our effort or achievement, but by God's power. And it is God's power that enables us to go beyond time in our prayers, in our sacrifices, etc. So therefore, when we speak of the gift of living in the divine will, we're speaking of a gift. I want to emphasize that word that's oftentimes overlooked. It doesn't depend upon our human achievement, which is virtue, or our correspondence only, but it depends primarily upon God's gratuity. God could have given this gift at any time in human history, but he chose to reserve it for these end times in which we're living. And it's a progression. Once we receive this gift, like Luisa did at the age of 24, we continue to grow in degrees. We enter a permanent state. And this state is eternity, which means that God, who was eternal, is entering within, by infusion, every thought, word, and action of ours, thereby not only elevating and divinizing every thought, word, and action of ours, but rendering them eternal. So our thoughts, words, and actions can become eternal by virtue of God's creative power that enters within us, that divinizes us, sanctifies us, and eternalizes everything we think, say, and do. Now, the theological and moral virtues are different from the divine virtues. Jesus reveals to Luisa that his divine will precedes and is inseparable from his divine love, as light precedes and is inseparable from its heat. And the soul must allow this divine will, this divine love, to absorb it, so that it may exercise God's own power. God elevates our finite virtues, our theological virtues, moral virtues, to the most heroic and divine degree. Now let me refer you to a passage from Luisa. I'll just give you the excerpt. You can reference this on your own. It's quite long. It's from volume 13, September 28, 1921. Now, how does this happen? The soul absorbs and consummates within itself the divinity's act, one eternal act. That's manifest in creation, redemption, and sanctification, that God brought forth with love. Jesus tells Luisa on October 28, 1928, in volume 25, "My daughter, everything that was accomplished by the divinity in creation, redemption, and sanctification has not yet been absorbed by the soul, as everything remains within my divinity, awaiting its actualization in souls. Now, in order for the kingdom of our divine will to reign among souls, the soul must absorb within itself all of these acts that the divinity accomplished for love of souls, and so absorb them, that it encloses within itself everything my fiat possesses, internalizing them and consummating them within itself. Thus, my divine will consummated within the soul's will and will actualize this whole divine army of divine acts in mankind. All of our acts in creation, redemption, and sanctification that we issued forth for love of souls will find their actualization in souls, and my divine will, actualized and consummated in them, will triumph, reign, and dominate along with our divine army. So God's absorbing the soul, and the soul's absorbing the Trinity's acts in creation, redemption, and sanctification, which is in essence one eternal act, okay? Because God is always in the present. Enable the soul to continuously and increasingly grow in his divine life and virtues. God's absorption of the soul elevates its virtues in such a way that these virtues we exercise are sustained by God's one eternal act and are rendered timeless, and their influence over all creation is timeless, whereby the soul arrives at the complete perfection of love. And this is found in volume 17, June 20th, 1924, where our Lord states, "Only when my will reigns in the soul in a complete way will love reach complete perfection in the soul, because then, by virtue of my will, everyone will be found in every soul loved, defended, and sustained, just as man's Creator loves him, defends him, and sustains him. Each soul will be transfused into the other as its own life. Then all the virtues will attain complete perfection, because they will not be nourished by a human life, but by a divine life." Now, Jesus goes through the litany of different types of virtues that we exercise, and I wish to emphasize trust, as I mentioned before, in these end times in particular. So let's go to trust in its relation to humility, because all the virtues are connected. Jesus tells Luisa, without trust, humility lacks that which renders it meritorious. Jesus tells Luisa on April 3rd, 1899, there cannot be true humility without trust. Humility without trust is a false virtue. Remember, humility provides the soul with peacefulness amidst the storm around us, amidst all this chaos around us. It envelops the soul, humility, and inspires it to respect the good in others. So Jesus here tells Luisa, on June 20th, 1900, from volume 3, the most perfect, the most sublime humility is that of losing one's way of reasoning and of not discoursing on the why and on the how, but of abandoning oneself to God in one's own nothingness. And in so doing, the soul, without realizing it, finds itself immersed in God. This in turn produces in the soul the most intimate union, the most perfect love toward its highest good. This is to the soul's greatest advantage, for in losing its own reason, the soul acquires divine reason, and in losing every inquiry of itself, whether the things that happen to it that are favorable or adverse, it will be interested in and will acquire a language that is completely divine and heavenly. Humility produces for the soul a garment of safety, whereby, wrapped in this garment of safety, the soul remains in the most profound calm, thoroughly embellishing itself in order to be pleasing to its dearest and beloved Jesus. Now, this expression, the soul must lose its reasoning, does not suggest that one ought to abandon reason. We need to rationalize, deliberate, reflect, and decide before we act. So reason is part and parcel of living in the divine will. We must use our reason before God and his representatives in the church, as exemplified in the Blessed Virgin Mary, who humbly asked the angel Gabriel, when he told her she would be the mother of God, how can this be? So faith and reason are an integral means to discerning the will of God. The reasoning Jesus asks here Luisa to abandon is that form of rationalism which seeks enlightenment without the guidance of faith. Purely pragmatic reasoning, without considering God's interests, okay? So the virtue of patience, humility, envelops the soul with a profound calm amidst a storm around it. And this patience has to have trust, because as mentioned earlier, humility without trust is a false humility. Now, I wish to read this passage to you about trust in God's love and in His mercy. Once I read this to you, you will most likely think this passage comes from Faustina. It's so powerful and it's so connected with God's mercy as well. Jesus tells Luisa, "My daughter, the souls who will shine the most," and this comes from April 10th, 1912, volume 11. "My daughter, the souls who will shine the most, like bright gems in the crown of my mercy, are the souls who have the most trust, because the more trust they have, the more they make room for the attribute of my mercy to pour into them any grace that they want." That's from Luisa. Sounds like Faustina. And the same teaching may also be found in volume 3 on February 4th, 1900, where Jesus tells Luisa, "Don't you know that lack of trust paralyzes the soul?" As well as on volume 5, July 19th, 1994, and in volume 4, October 14th, 1901. Trust is a very powerful thing in these end times. In fact, if you see this image over here, that's the divine mercy right there. I'll move the camera if I can a little bit, you can see it better. Right there, there's the image of the divine mercy. And the reason why Jesus had this image struck at the request of Faustina to an artist was because now we have to have trust. Jesus knew these times were upon us. So he had Faustina add at the bottom of the picture in Polish, "Jezu ufam Tobie." Jesus, I trust in you. And this is important. You know, divine mercy is connected with the divine will. Number one, because in these end times of the greatest evil, there is the greatest outpouring of mercy through God's vessel, Faustina and Luisa Piccarreta, these two vessels, and through our trust in Him. So going back through the divine will and it being a gift and not a virtue, we cannot receive this gift without trust. Why? Because if we use only human reason to understand what God is doing in us, we will never consent to it because we won't understand it. You see, this gift is so great that it surpasses human comprehension. Jesus tells this to Luisa many times, but it's not without reason and guided by faith. For example, let me give you an example. I'll ask you a few questions. Do you understand the hypostatic union of God becoming man? If you don't fully understand it, then why do you believe it? How do you believe it? Out of trust. Let me ask you another question. Do you understand transubstantiation? How God can become a bread and wine, literally. And if you don't fully understand it, why do you believe it? And how do you believe it? By trust. Faith guided, inspired by reason. Reason inspired by faith. But you don't abandon reason, you use reason. You say, okay, well, I can use examples, analogies, like the sun, or like to explain the Trinity, or I could use an example like a mother and a daughter, or a child giving birth. How does the mother produce the daughter? How does the mother generate another human being? It happens, but we don't understand how it happens. God is behind that miracle of birth. So we can use that as an example and say, okay, I see a parallel, rational possibility here. And this is how we receive the gift of living in the divine will. How is it possible for God to with his own creative power, render our finite acts in the human body in time and space timeless, whereby they are able to extend throughout the past, present, future times, impacting all creature of all time. We can't fully understand this, but with an act of trust, we adhere to it with faith like we do transubstantiation, the hypostatic union, the mystery of the Trinity, and so forth. So the gift of living in the divine will is a mystery of our faith. Sometimes we may be caught up in the rationalization of this reality, of this mystery. And therefore this minimizes and diminishes our zeal or our enthusiasm, because we keep trying to understand it to the point where it can be distracting. We must use reason, yes, but always guided by faith. Now, how do we know that this is in fact a mystery of our faith? Well, because we have the church to say so, God's church. Christ said to St. Peter in Matthew chapter 16, "On this rock I will build my church." He didn't say your church. Think of that. This is his church. He appointed representatives. And he tells Luisa that he does nothing without his priests. Nothing. So he sent Luisa to St. Hannibal. And every secretary of God, whether it's Faustina, Margaret Mary Alacoque, Catherine Emmerich, whoever, is always sent by God to a priest. Always. Because this is his church. And he appointed this chain of command. God at the top, the papacy beneath God, the episcopate, the presbyterate, the diaconate, the consecrated, the lay. But even though you have this sort of spiritual totem pole that God put in place, this spiritual divine chain of command or hierarchy, it doesn't mean that the one at the bottom of the pole or the top of the pole are inferior or superior. We're all equal in God's love, in his nobility, and in his kingdom, where we are all called to occupy the highest hierarchy in heaven by virtue of the outpouring of this gift in these end times. Where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more, St. Paul said. And God has chosen to save his best wine for last. In these last days of human civilization before the kingdom of the divine will on earth, God is outpouring his best wine, which is this gratuitous gift given to us due to no exercise of our human virtue or our merit, due to no merit of ours, but due to his gratuity. Now, certainly we must dispose ourselves to receive this gift by exercising the virtues. But that's only disposing. We don't obtain it. We simply dispose ourselves. And then we wait for God to say fiat. And he's the one who gives it to us. All the saints of the past were perfectly disposed to receive this gift. But one thing was missing, the gift itself. Just like John the Baptist and St. Joseph were perfectly disposed to receive these sacraments, but never received them. The only thing missing in their lives was Jesus saying fiat. So we are blessed to be chosen in these end times. We are the least meritorious of all human generations to receive this gift. We are the most rebellious of all generations, most rebellious of all generations that ever were. There's no doubt about it. But it's precisely because where sin abounds all the more, that God's mercy overcomes sin, and the darkness cannot contain the light. So God will win with this chain of light that he's forming through these links of his grace that are being established in our soul by him exercising his will through our will, his intellect through our intellect, and his memory through our memory. But let us not fear, but trust that God is in charge, even in these chaotic times, and everything that's happening is not by chance. It's by direct ordinance of the Most Holy Trinity. Now, God also emphasizes in Luisa's writings that linked to trust is obedience. Obedience, Jesus tells Luisa, stands out as the quintessential virtue. But we have to understand what obedience means. Whenever we hear the word obedience, many people's first reaction is, to who? Who am I going to obey? I'm not going to obey him. I'm not going to obey him. Who am I going to obey? Why do we have that reaction? Well, because we want to safeguard our soul and not expose it to danger. We don't want to obey the wrong individual. We want to invest our souls in someone in whom we can trust. So trust is linked to obedience. We have to trust the source of that obedience. So number one, it's God. We obey God in the internal forum of our conscience. That's the first exercise of obedience. Even before the church, it's to God. Then the second exercise of obedience to our parents when we're children. Then the third is to the church. And we have to inform our conscience, of course, of what church teaching is. Now, suppose someone tells you to do something, an authority, whether it's in the family or in the church or in the government, that tells you to do something that's wrong. Do you do it? You know, I was once asked, I was being prepared for vows in 1991 when I was in Italy. I entered the seminary in 88. I've been ordained since 97, that's 24 years. But while I was being formed in 1991 for vows, we were talking about the three evangelical counsels of obedience, poverty, and chastity that we would have to pledge. So when we were discussing obedience, I asked one of the formators, what if the superior tells me to jump from a fifth story roof? Should I obey him? And my superior said, what would you do? And I said, I would say, after you. And he said, good answer. So we have to use our reasoning, but guided by faith. If someone tells you to do something immoral, you don't do it. Why? Because all authority comes from God. And when that authority encroaches upon God's will, our conscience says, don't do it. I'll give you another example. Saint Joan of Arc, who was martyred by the church and declared a saint by the church, right? She was allowed an audience with the Pope when she was being tried at the court and being accused of being a witch before being burned at the stake. And by the grace of God and God's providence, she had a spiritual guide, a priest, who told her that it's your right to see the Pope and have an audience with the Pope, because they were basically trying her under the false pretexts with this kangaroo court and lying about the things she said, manipulating her words. But they denied her an audience with the Pope. They lied to her. So her spiritual guide informed her that they were wrong. And was she to simply say, okay, because you say I can't see the Pope, I will believe you. I will trust you. In this case, no, you don't obey. You should insist. I want an audience with the Pope. It's my right as a Christian, as a Catholic. Unfortunately, she had a priest who kept her abreast of her rights as a Catholic. So we have to inform our conscience through the aid of the church, of others, but also we have to obey first God through our conscience, then our parents when we're children, then the church. And when the angel Gabriel asked Mary to become the mother of God, what did she say? She did not say, sir, yes, sir. She said, how is this possible? She reasoned, she questioned, she asked how, and then the angel explained to her. And God was pleased by her questioning, her reasoning, because she did it with the light of faith in order for her intellect to accompany her fiat of the will. You see, if we don't know why we do something and just do it, that's blind obedience. The church does not advocate blind obedience. It does not. This is found in two of the church's magisterial teachings. Number one, vita consacrata, consecrated life. An apostolic exhortation by Saint Pope John Paul II. And another work called Gaudium et Spes, a second Vatican Council document. Both of them state that obedience is not a heteronomy, where your will is blindly following commands without your intellect being engaged or understanding. That's a robot. But rather, obedience is the fruit of dialogue, with the superior having the last words after the dialogue. So if a superior or a bishop or even the Pope or someone says, do this, and you ask why or when or how, they are obliged to engage you in that dialogue and explain. This is how obedience is, just like with Mary and the angel. And God will be pleased by that. And we do this out of the good of our own spiritual betterment. We want to trust the source of these commands and trust, with both the intellect and the will. So the virtue of obedience, Jesus tells Luisa, is the quintessence of love. Obedience is the finest, the purest, the most perfect love extracted from the most painful sacrifice. This comes from Volume 1, and it's an undated entry. Because when Luisa wrote Volume 1 after her first few volumes, at the request of her spiritual director, spiritual counselor, she was writing it years after these events took place, so she could not recall all the dates. That's why you'll find in Volume 1 a lot of missing dates. But she remembered the events themselves. Glitch, all right. So Jesus tells Luisa, if the soul raises the slightest difficulty at what is commanded it, fearing that some vice may begin to reemerge within its heart, obedience wages war against the soul and affords it no peace until the soul prostrates itself at her feet and does with utmost silence whatever she wants. Obedience kills one's own will, and in torrents pours into it the divine, to such an extent that one can say that the obedient soul no longer lives by its own will, but by the divine will. And this virtue of obedience in the soul gives death to everything earthly and material and restores its original perfection. So obedience has the power to divinize the soul, accompanied by trust in the source giving that command, and to transform its operation from the human mode, the human ways of thinking, acting, and praying, into the divine and eternal mode. So I now address the virtues of humility, of trust, of obedience, and I think these are important for these end times because there's a lot of confusion being circulated now, especially on social media. You have all groups attacking different sources. So you have a group attacking the Pope, a group attacking the government, a group attacking religious institutions, a group attacking the platforms that censor freedom of speech. So there's a lot of confusion, a lot of attacks going in every direction, and we're caught in this crossfire. How do we discern true from false sources? This is important. The first thing we have to do in these end times of confusion is inform our conscience of church doctrine. Why? Because doctrine never changes. Discipline changes. The church's discipline has changed throughout the centuries and will continue to change. That is our external form of worship. So if we go to one country, they have a different external form of worship than in another country. These are called, you may call them rites, different rites, or you may have different canon laws, like East and West. In the West, Western Code of Canon Law, the priest cannot be married. In the Eastern Code, they can. This is a discipline and it can change. But doctrine never changes. Doctrine is the unchanging revelation of Christ, preached by the apostles, known in Greek as kerygma ton apostolos, the first proclamation of the apostles of the Easter mysteries, Christ resurrected. So inform ourselves of church doctrine, which never changes. Now, you have, even in the church, what you refer to popularly, and the media refers to as conservative and liberal. And this is an overgeneralization because certain people may be from a certain country that is more progressive than another. And if they're raised in that country, they will have progressive leanings. It's just part of their social formation. But that doesn't mean that their doctrine is progressive, necessarily, just their social formation, okay? And I say this many times. Pope Francis came from Argentina, which is a very socialistic country. So he's naturally going to be more progressive in his social formation, not in his doctrine, than, let's say, a Ratzinger, who was raised in Germany, a more conservative, at the time he was alive, more conservative, socially formed environment, okay? That's just their social formation. But some people confuse the two, and they'll attack the Pope because he has these social formative leanings. They don't distinguish discipline or from doctrine or social formation from doctrinal formation. And for this reason, Pope Benedict XVI, Emeritus, said that Pope Francis has a very profound theological formation. He's not talking about social formation, he's talking about theological formation. So Pope Francis has not said one thing doctrinally wrong, even though people are claiming this is false. I'm not speaking as a theologian who did my dissertation in Rome. I've examined all of his teachings. What he does is he says something from the hip, off the cuff, and the media takes it and spins it to their own agenda. And what happens? Those who are quick to criticize the Pope spread it as weapons against the Pope. And this hurts us because he is our vicar, the vicar of Christ and also our representative before God. And even Luisa Piccarreta, who held the papacy always in high esteem, respected him and considered him as such, the vicar of Christ. And we must pray for him. And he prays for us, obviously. So first thing we must do in these days of confusion, in these end times, is form our conscience through the unchanging doctrine of the church, Christ's church, not our church, God's church. Number two, we must find those who are faithful to the teachings of Christ's church. Find those who are faithful to the magisterium and listen to them. Don't follow those who attack the church's doctrine, who attack the magisterium. You have to always be loyal to Christ's church. Remember, it's not our church, it's his. And then, of course, we have to be vigilant on allowing only good sources to influence our minds. So we should not go running around on this internet blog or this internet site trying to create a potpourri or a melting pot of different spiritualities, devotions that contradict each other. You know, I see the websites out there that throw everything together, good and bad. And it's like, pick for yourself, choose for yourself. And I've written people on these blogs saying this is bad. There are several out there. They post the latest news without discerning whether or not this is of God, with things that are approved by the church. So you have an admixture. This confuses us. It's better to avoid these blogs altogether and stick to only those, or these websites, or these sources that are faithful to church's magisterium. Otherwise, we're going to be confused, like headless chickens running around, never growing spiritually. And this is also why the church has taught since time immemorial that we shouldn't be mixing together all these different devotions into one thing. So it's not prudent for us to mix the divine will with this devotion, this devotion, this devotion, this devotion, this devotion. This is spiritual. This causes spiritual indigestion. And there's no heartburn pill that can fix it except just stopping it. And this is why the church, since time immemorial, has kept distinct different spirituality. So you have the Benedictines, whose spirituality is prayer and work, ora et labora. Then you have the Franciscans, whose spirituality is poverty. Then you have the Dominicans, whose spirituality is preaching, and the list goes on. So you don't see a Benedictine and a Franciscan and a Dominican mixing each other's devotions, do you? Well, that same teaching of the Church applies to us. There's nothing wrong with having a devotion to Faustina, the Divine Mercy, and the Divine Will of Luisa Piccarreta, and the Mary Movement of Priests of Father Gobi. These are all good. But when you meet to talk about the Divine Will, talk about the Divine Will. You can talk about these others, but don't start mixing them together, because this really causes confusion. And it's even worse when you bring in unapproved revelations that are on websites that the Church has not even acknowledged, only to find out later that the bishop condemned it, or this one condemned it, and you say, oh, all right. So we have to be careful, because it's healthy spiritually for us to be grounded in the divine will. So, and we can make reference to these other ecclesiastically approved revelations, that's fine. But when they're not approved, we have to be very careful. And then again, even if they are approved, have a separate time to promote that. Promote the divine will. Have a prayer group on the divine will, a conference on the divine will. But don't start throwing in all these other devotions, because it gets confusing. You can do those separately, that's fine. Okay? So in these end times, this is, I believe, how the Church teaches us to keep our focus, not be confused despite all the confusion out there, and remain loyal to Christ by trusting in this gift of his eternal act, which is operating in our every thought, word, and action, and everything we think saved. All right, I'm almost about the end of my hour. Any questions?
Any questions, fathers? Yes, Father Peter, can you give a question, please?
Yep. Joseph, I really appreciated that. I've got a question regarding the gift. You said that the gift, it's freely given by our Lord. It can change the present, the future, but also the past. Can you give me some examples of how it changes the past?
Yes. The divine will impacts all things of all time. It impacts them. So Luisa, for example, when she was praying, went into Eden, her soul bilocated. Jesus uses this word over 100 times in her 36 volumes, bilocation. Now, it's not a physical, but a spiritual bilocation. Basically, the soul is immaterial, and it's not therefore confined to time or space, as is the body. So the soul can multilocate. This is the whole principle underlying the rounds in creation. The soul goes into the sun, the moon, the stars. So Luisa goes back into the Garden of Eden, and she prays for Adam before the fall. And she says, I'm praying so that I can dispose Adam for his act of repentance after he commits original sin. How can she do that? If not by the power of God taking her soul, so to speak, and making it present, multiplying its presence in more than one place, like Christ in the Eucharist. When the priest consecrates the bread, if there are 1,000 hosts on the altar, in one act, he's present in every host. God uses that same sort of dynamism with our soul. Just as Christ multiplies his presence in the bread and the wine, he multiplies his presence in us in different places where we intend with our intentionality to go. So Luisa formed the intention to dispose Adam to make this act of confession. And she did. She was able to influence him, even though in time, chronological time, he existed thousands of years before her. See, with God, there is no time. With us, there is. Consider a cemetery, and you want to pray for all the people in the cemetery, and you go from one monument to the next monument or tombstone, and this is how you pray for them in a linear fashion. This is how the saints prayed. But with the gift of living in the divine will, what happens to the soul is this. God elevates it above time, whereby, like a bird from above, it sees all tombstones in one broad view. And by virtue of being above, it can therefore pray for all in one broad sweep. All souls that have died there, from the 7th century to the 10th century to the 15th century to the present, and even into the future. Of course, there are no tombstones there yet. But that's an analogy to show you how God empowers our soul, not our body, to go into the past, present, and future, impacting all things. This is the principle of redemption. How did Christ redeem all human generations? Think of that. How did Christ redeem the souls of the Old Testament that lived before him? Right? His soul embraced all these acts of all humans and their souls as well, and into the future. So Christ's one redemptive act that took one lifetime was able to redeem all human generations. How was it possible? By his soul bilocating into the past, present, future.
Yeah, that's very, very well explained. But if you take you take a soul that's any soul in the say 100 years ago, for instance, you might know your grandparent, and you're thinking, gee, I want to now use the gift to be able to go back to their life to help them to have repentance over some sin, whatever, which could be the difference between them going to hell or purgatory. Could that affect that?
Yes. Remember, the church teaches, the Council of Trent taught that the particular judgment will not be changed during the general judgment. So once a soul leaves the body, its particular judgment is pronounced definitively. Nothing can change that. So therefore, when at the final resurrection, the final judgment, the sentences pronounced will not vary from those of the particular judgment at the moment of the person's death. So even though these ancestors of ours died before us, our prayers do not change their particular judgment that God already pronounced. But what happens is that while they were alive, God had already applied our prayers today to them. Follow me? So God, who is timeless, can take the prayers of someone 100 years from now and apply it to us right now today, because God foresees their prayers and actions in his timelessness. This is the same dynamism of redemption. God applied to the souls of Enoch, Elijah, David, Joseph of the Old Testament, the Maccabees, the prayers of us today, even though we were not yet conceived or born or did our acts. And he applied the same thing with Christ's acts. So the church refers to these acts, redemptive acts of Christ, as foreseen or pre-existent acts of Christ that are retroactive, present, and proactive. This is how the redemptive acts work, yeah.
Yeah, so if you had, I can understand with our Lord, a person 100 years from now praying for my soul, affecting
Right.
it now. But if I've already had my particular judgment, so I've died, I've had my particular judgment. It's, to me, that's just a great mystery of how I could affect. For instance, you take Judas, for instance.
Yeah.
Could my prayer of the gift of the divine will today affect Judas to be able to reach out for God's mercy? The answer would obviously be no to that.
Right, not now. You see, basically, if you pray for Judas now, for him to be saved or to not kill himself, whatever, because Luisa says in 3 parts of the Hours of the Passion that he was lost. Jesus tells her he was lost in the Hours of the Passion on 3 occasions. But if we, just knowing that, prayed for his conversion or his forgiveness, it would not be effective because his particular judgment has already been pronounced. But what God does is use our prayers during his lifetime when he was alive, which he already squandered. So you may pray for him now, but he will have squandered them anyway. You see?
Mm-hmm. So, but then, and you spoke about the general judgment.
Yeah.
My understanding of the general and the particular is the particular is for each person when they die themselves, they will get a particular judgment. I've always understood the general judgment to be those who are living at the time, at the end of the world, they will be judged at that point. But
It's both. Yeah, the general judgment, the Council of Trent teaches that at the general judgments, all bodies will be raised, no matter where they are, even those that were cremated.
Yeah,
Somehow they will, yeah.
I'm not talking about them being raised and getting their body back, their physical body. I'm actually talking about the actual judgment. So
Yeah. But to understand my answer, you have to understand the context of my answer. So the context is the Council of Trent taught that at the general judgments, all bodies will be raised of all time, and that group will be judged all over again, even though they were particularly judged. This is the teaching of Trent. Everyone will be raised and judged again. And it says that the general judgment will not vary from the particular judgment. So the question is, why do they have to be judged a second time? And the answer is, because their glory will be manifest to everyone and their condemnation to everyone. So this general judgment...
I missed that last point. You said you said the general judgment...
The general judgment will not vary from the particular judgment. So the question is, why do they have to be judged a second time? And the answer, again, is provided by Trent, that the general judgment is a manifestation to all. So Jesus says, nothing that is hidden, nothing is hidden that will not be unveiled. Nothing is concealed that will not be revealed. So everything will be shown at the general judgment in the sight of all. Even the fall of the angels, even they will be judged at the general judgment. This is a teaching of Trent. So it's not just the people who are alive at the time of Christ's return. It's everyone of all time will be judged at the general judgment. Yes, this is a teaching of Trent.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, because therefore everyone who's being judged will be identical to the general judgment, but only those that are living will have them there at their final judgment. I can see that point. So getting back to my first question about the gift and praying for those that have died, they've already been judged. We will not therefore be able to affect a damned soul by praying for them now, and therefore could we also not be able to affect a soul who's not been damned to have even more grace? Is that possible?
We cannot take a person out of hell. Never. Once you're in hell, you're there forever. The thing is, God keeps from us the knowledge of a lot of this. We don't know who's in hell. We don't know who's in heaven unless the church canonizes someone. Then we know that they've made it. So there's a reason why God does not reveal this to us. We know very few people that are in hell, only from approved prophetic revelation, like Faustina. Faustina says in her Diary of Divine Mercy that she recognized in hell, when she went there, some people she knew on earth. But how many people do we know that are in hell? We don't. We know maybe Judas, because Jesus told Luisa that. Maybe during exorcisms, it's revealed that this person is in hell tormenting a soul. Because of that, we know it. But we don't know 99.9% of the people where they are. Only God knows this. So therefore, Luisa, in the hours of the Passion, would pray for the salvation of all souls. You may say to yourself, well, how can she do that? We know some souls are in hell. How could she pray for everyone's salvation? She did it out of charity, leaving it up to God to apply whatever prayers that she prayed for to the people that were in need of them. So we don't have to really nitpick about this and that of, I don't want to pray for him, he's in hell. I want to pray for him because he's not in hell. We don't know these things. What we simply do is say fiat to God and pray for all, that none may be lost, like Luisa did. And the rest is up to the people who decide to reject our prayers or accept them.
Thank you, Father.
Yep.
Thank you.
Father, can I ask a question then? So the redoing of all acts of all human creatures, regardless to where they're going to be going, because that's, if they're going to go to hell or anything like that, would redoing those acts kind of have some sort of change in creation as far as the divine will is concerned?
Yes, St. Paul says in his 10th chapter to the Romans that all creation groans with eager longing, waiting to be freed from its slavery to corruption, in expectation of the revelation of the sons of God. So here Paul links the sons of God with creation being freed from its slavery to corruption. So our prayers in the divine will can enliven all creation, increase the accidental glory of creation, both rational and irrational creatures. So Luisa, she would do this from time to time. She would formulate the intention of increasing the accidental glory of certain creatures. She did this with Aloysius de Gonzaga, whom she was named after. One day she received communion and asked the Lord to increase his glory, even though he was in heaven. And Jesus appeared to her and told her that all of her acts in the divine will given to St. Aloysius that day increased his glory so much that he could no longer contain it, as it overflowed in heaven for the increased glory of all the blessed and angels. So I don't know if that answers your question, but our acts can impact and increase the glory of souls of the past, present, and future.
It kind of does. I was kind of just adding on to what Father was saying there, as far as for souls who are already judged, whether that judgment was to be damned or not. But so we probably won't go there. But all souls that we redo acts for will have some sort of effect on creation positively. Is probably what I was. Yeah. Jesus makes it clear throughout Luisa's volumes that Adam and Eve, before they sinned, had a mission. And that mission or vocation was to deposit within their own will all the acts of all creatures. Jesus tells Luisa that when he was conceived in Mary's womb, he conceived all souls within his soul, in his will. And that Mary did this as well. Mary conceived all souls within her soul. And that Luisa and we are to do the same. We are to conceive all souls within our souls. What's the point of this? So that we can expand our soul to establish a divine kingdom within it that contains all creatures. Now, this is a spiritual reality. It's not a physical reality. And this was Adam and Eve's mission in Eden before they sinned. They were to, the word that Luisa uses is depositare, to deposit within their will all acts of all creatures. And this is our mission in life. When we do our rounds in creation, we place our I love you in every thought, word, and action of every creature, in the motions of the sun, in the movements of the grass. We are, in essence, allowing God's power. Remember, the gift of the divine will is not a virtue, it's a gift. Allowing God's power through our finite acts that he invests with an eternal quality to increase the glory of all creation. So Jesus tells Luisa these divine acts in his will maintain the harmony of the universe and increase their qualitatively their accidental glory. So yes, we can absolutely increase the glory of souls that are on earth, that are in purgatory, that are in heaven. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Father, probably you made mention that for all those who have died, of course, we don't know where they are, whether they're in heaven or they're in hell. Just we keep praying for them. Of course, yes, that's true. We agree with that. So probably, I think even in the church, we have canonized many saints. So is it possible that any of those people canonized that die in hell, or all of them are there in heaven?
You're very far away. I couldn't hear the question.
You don't go to the microphone. Go to the microphone. Hang on.
Should I?
Thank you. Okay, so I was saying, but yeah, you mentioned those who have died, yeah, but we don't know where they are, whether they're in heaven or they're in hell. Just we wait for them. Only God knows. So probably in the church, maybe we have many saints who have been canonized. So yes. My question is it possible that any of those canonized saints, maybe that the church has canonized, whether it's possible for any of them to be in hell?
I wouldn't think so, even though the act of canonization is not an infallible act. It is founded upon the testimony of those who knew that saint, and that testimony requires proof, that is audible proof, people who've seen the person, and also miracles through the intercession of that person. that this person lived a life of heroic Christian virtue. Now, anyone who lives a life of heroic Christian virtue cannot go to hell. That's a fact. Whoever lives a life of heroic Christian virtue cannot go to hell because they're living in God's grace. And a person in God's grace doesn't go to hell. It's only if you're out of his grace that you go to hell. Mortal sin, unrepentant mortal sin, which is out of God's grace, can alone take you to hell. So the church has a process, an inquiry, where they examine meticulously the virtues, and they even have a devil's advocate to try to prove that they were not virtues, that they were just, selfish acts. Like with Pope John Paul II, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, you had the devil's advocate claiming she was stealing children off the street, Mother Teresa, and not helping them. But that was debunked. So the church goes through a process where they have to prove meticulously before devil's advocate that this person lived the virtues in a heroic manner, habitually, stably, and that through their intercession, 2 miracles that defy the laws of science exist. So that's a pretty difficult feat for someone who's going to hell to pull off. So I would say, even though the act of canonizing a person is not an infallible declaration of the church, the probability of it being wrong is like 99.9% impossible. Because they have to, the church will not canonize someone simply because they were popular. That's not good enough. They have to perform a miracle, 1, to be beatified, and 2, to be a saint. And the devil can't perform good miracles to lead someone back to the church. The devil can perform temporary things, but then, of course, in the end, it always founders. But good question, but I don't, it's a good question, but the probability is high that all the canonized are not in hell, very high.
Thank you, Father. Any more questions? Fr Iannuzzi, we want to say thank you very much, Father Joseph. You're
welcome.
God bless you, Father Joseph, and we hope you can make it to Australia. Who knows? Maybe next year. Who knows?
Well, as long as this COVID traveling ban is lifted, yeah.
Well,
God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you, Father Joseph.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
That's good. That should generate.
Liking this video and subscribing help us promote this content and the divine will. Thank you, and God bless.